fighting to cleanse the world of ancient evil, ancient ill. In this war of survival, we must keep before our minds not only the evil things we fight against, but the good things we are fighting for. We are fighting today for security, for progress, and for peace, not only for ourselves, but for all men. Not only for one generation, but for all generations.
When reconversion got underway, pay envelopes were thinner. Bill Turner took a cut of $15. No more overtime. Take-home pay was cut, but the rent wasn't. Nor the price of shoes. Nor the price of food. Bill thought of the promises made during the war of C.E. Wilson, president of General Electric.
After the war is won, take-home pay on a 40-hour-a-week basis must eventually represent the higher levels of pay that now prevail.
No, things weren't what Bill had hoped for. Roosevelt was gone, and his enemies were on hand to claim the victory. Pay cuts at home, oppression abroad. Bill didn't like it. The UE is a good-sized outfit. Over 600,000 men and women organized in hundreds of locals. In Bill's local, the cut in take-home pay was on everybody's mind. Other locals felt the same way, and the union asked for an increase of $2 a day. The companies claimed they were unable to pay it unless price ceilings were hoisted. But UE had the facts. Let's take a look at a refrigerator that retailed at $169 in 1939. Here's where the money went. Raw materials and depreciation. Advertising. Distribution costs and profits. Manufacturer's profits. Against all this are the production labor costs, $17.40. Since 1939, the margin of profit had increased. OPA granted an increase of $7.77. The workers were producing more per hour and saving the company an estimated $3.66 per refrigerator. The UE demand of $2 a day would only mean $4.35 more in labor costs. Even with this increase, the Federal Trade Commission estimated that in the first year of full production, profits on refrigerators would be nearly $7 million more than in 1939. Furthermore, the companies were in possession of tremendous wartime profits. No, prices did not have to go up. except for the greed of the companies. Another company propaganda angle was that wage increases would cause inflation because the workers, with their war bonds, would have too much money. Here again, UE had the facts. A government survey tells the truth about which families have what savings. Nearly 2/3 have only 7%. All this is held by 10% of the people. In other words, the majority of people have so little that a week or two of unemployment or an illness wipes out the savings. As Bill pointed out, the layoffs during reconversion and the reduction in take-home pay meant big trouble to millions of families. What the companies left unsaid was how they rated the United States Treasury. Republicans and Southern Democrats, by wartime tax bills, guaranteed profits to all corporations through 1946, even if they were not producing. President Roosevelt called the bill relief for the greedy, not for the needy. In effect, an anti-labor Congress gave a huge strike fund to big business. No wonder UE President Fitzgerald had to report no progress on his wage negotiations.
The electrical manufacturers have refused to bargain in good faith. In other basic industries, too, such as auto and steel, the employers are tough and unreasonable. As Phil Murray says, there is a conspiracy by big business against American democracy. To understand this conspiracy, we must remember what happened after World War I in 1919. At that time, to meet the high cost of living, labor unions asked for wage increases. The answer was a lesson. Employers mobilized the full power of the government against the unions. Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer said he was after communists. Under cover of red baiting, he and the employers crippled the trade unions. In 2 years, 1/3 of the membership was lost. Big business was in control. It ran the government. It brought us to 1929. To this, and this, and this.
They want no get-rich-quick era of bogus prosperity, which will end for them in selling apples on a street corner.
Roosevelt is dead and a reactionary Congress has taken over. Big business thinks it can repeat 1919. We in the CIO want industrial peace. But if big business wants to take America for a ride again, we intend to fight.
Bill Turner voted to strike. one of the ballots that rolled up a majority of 83% in favor of action. The locals voted to fight for food and clothing and rent against the company's drive for undue profits and fatter dividends. The company's greed can only be realized by knowing all the facts about them. Here's what Bill and the UE were up against. The plant where Bill worked employed 15,000 people. It was only one of the General Electric network, employing 125,000 workers. Westinghouse employed 75,000. General Motors Electrical Division, 25,000. Together, they control 50% of the industry, and in December 1942, the Department of Justice brought General Electric and Westinghouse into court on charges of monopolizing fluorescent lamps. Also in 1942, a grand jury slapped General Electric with a criminal indictment, charging that General Electric, along with other companies,
did unlawfully, willfully, and feloniously conspire, combine, confederate, and agree together to defraud the United States by making collusive, fraudulent, identical, and non-competitive bids at unreasonably high prices.
But this is not all. In spite of war, these companies operate internationally through subsidiaries, stock participation, and cartel agreements with various other companies. IG Farben Industrie, Allgemeine Elektrizität Gesellschaft, Siemens Schuckenwerke, Siemens Halske, Opel, Fried Group Antigesellschaft, Tokyo Shibaura, Mitsubishi Electrical Engineering Company, Westinghouse Electric Company of Japan, Compagnia Generale di Elettricità, Magrini Società Anonima, and many more all over the world. Internationally, as well as nationally, profit, big profit, is the battle cry. A General Electric Group agreement sent the price of tungsten carbide from $50 a pound to $453 a pound. This monopoly price kept production low. The United States government cracked down with a criminal indictment. But the damage had been done. Tungsten carbide was one of the great bottlenecks in war production. On the other side of the world, Kwanzo Tanaka, chairman of Mitsubishi, announced that part of their profits had been set aside for Westinghouse. Where did this money come from? This is but a part of what Bill and the UE had to face. These companies have powerful connections in other industries which were also fighting the labor movement. The nature and power of these connections staggers the imagination. Take General Electric, for example. Its total assets are $543 million, over $500 million. That's a lot of money. Yes, General Electric is a big company. Yet here it is in scale as one of 13 industrial companies, including U.S. Steel, which are controlled by the J.P. Morgan interests. Plus 12 utility companies, including American Telephone and Telegraph. Plus 8 railroads. Plus 3 major banks. Morgan interests control a total of $31 billion through these companies alone. $31 billion. It's so much money, it's impossible to think of it. Suppose it was laid out in $100 bills. the end of a block of, say, 400 feet, you could pick up $78,000 in about 15 minutes. But to pick up the rest of the $31 billion, you'd have to walk clear around the Earth 1¼ times, and it would take you 400 years on a 40-hour week. Yes, the Morgan Group is powerful. It took the power of the United States government even to find out these facts. And since our taxes paid for this investigation, let's get our money's worth. Morgan is the largest group. Then there is the strong Kuhn-Loeb group. The Mellon interests, which have Westinghouse. DuPont with General Motors. And then there is Rockefeller. And 3 other groups, making up a grand total of some $82 billion assets in 1945, exclusive of government-owned plants, which they are now busy buying up cheap. These assets represent control over plants, railways, banks, and most important of all, jobs. 8 groups dispose of over 30% of all the assets in the United States. These 8 groups operate through a screen of 106 corporations, and some idea of their power can be had by seeing in scale how many firms own the rest. These 250,000 corporations exclude the million-odd small businesses in America. 8 groups control the American economy not only because of their concentration of wealth, but through their strategic ownership of basic industries. Every consumer and every businessman in America hands over a percentage of their earnings to these 8 groups, often without knowing it. This is what is meant by big business. This is what is meant by their control of American economy. Big business is international. There were similar groups in Germany, Japan, Italy, England, France, Holland, Belgium, Spain, and smaller countries. Through colonial rule or subservient governments, they controlled raw materials and markets in most of the world. This is the big league in world business. Its name is imperialism. It leads to war, as Hitler's story shows. For Hitler had a dream that his big business should dominate the world. He called his dream the New Order. Foreign big business was weakened during the war, and today American big business is the strongest. And they have a dream to dominate the world. They call their dream the American century. The American century means the century of big business instead of the century of the common people. No, things weren't what Bill had hoped for, in more ways than one. Bill's kid brother was still in China. His letters all read the same.
I'm fed up with this mess. We're still training the Chinese. Thought the war was over. This place gives me the creeps. Kids hang around our garbage cans, waiting for us to clean our plates, while their own government big shots take their cut of UNRWA supplies. What a deal. What goes on here?
Bill was wondering too. He believed in the war as a great struggle against the enemies of the common people. But he was finding out now that not all his enemies were on the Axis side. Strange facts about the war were coming out. In 1942, we wanted to land in France. But Churchill pressed for a campaign in Italy to save Britain's interests in the Mediterranean. Still playing power politics, he pulled troops out of Italy and sent them off to Greece to fight on the king's side against the people.
Diversion of 8th Army units to meet the political crisis in Greece disrupted our plans. The Germans had time to refit and strengthen their forces.
American lives were sacrificed to pay for a Greek government the people didn't want. All this apparently seems quite normal to Congress. Roosevelt's old enemies are again making government policy. They are the friends of big business, the men who believe in atomic diplomacy. The president himself shared the platform at an American university with Winston Churchill when he called for an Anglo-American alliance against Russia. Is this what millions of men died for?
But we of the United Nations are not making all this sacrifice of human effort and human lives to return to the kind of world we had after the last World War.
When Bill walked on the picket line the morning of January 15th, he was fighting for the decent standard of living that Roosevelt had pledged in the Economic Bill of Rights. The right to a job, to food and clothing, to fair prices, to protection against monopolies, the right to a decent home, medical care, a good education, the right to economic security. Bill fought for this new Bill of Rights as part of a mighty CIO struggle against the economic royalists. At the National Labor Management Conference, CIO President Philip Murray had sought tenaciously for recognition of the need for wage increases and of price control. Within a week, 1.5 million CIO workers were on strike. Auto, steel, packers, communication, farm equipment, all fighting for a decent America. Lynn, Massachusetts, Ontario, California, Fairmont, West Virginia, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Jersey City, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Schenectady, Philadelphia, plant after plant, town after town, from coast to coast, the picket lines grew. Big lines and little. The machinery of strike committees functioned like clockwork, and the UE strike was solid 100%. In bitter January weather, there was fire for cold hands and feet, hot coffee and hot food for weary union fighters. The support of the strike was magnificent. There were plenty of attempts at provocation, but the picket lines were solid. The most significant phase of the UE strike was the tremendous community support it received. Dozens of mayors and dozens of city governments and dozens of congressmen supported those on strike. Typical was Lynn, Massachusetts, where the mayor sent a letter to GE.
I have talked personally with many of the workers. I have listened to their arguments, and I must say that their demands seem reasonable and just under all present-day circumstances.
The townspeople agreed with the mayor. Druggist Flaherty offered free medicines. The shoemaker offered shoe repairs. In fact, the whole community pitched in. This was something new for a GE town.
Adequate buying power is necessary to sustain the business life of the community. to enable property owners to pay taxes, to enable a city to conduct its municipal government on the basis of solvency and service.
The interests of the community and the interests of the workers were one. The justice of the union position was obvious. The companies could not conceal the truth. The union waged one of the greatest publicity campaigns in trade union history. It used ads, radio, records, and sound trucks. The UE beat the companies at their own game. The people could not be divided. The union could not be isolated. Its strike machinery stood up, and Jim Matley's national director of organization for once was satisfied.
When the companies failed to isolate us from the communities, they tried to smash us by the use of injunctions. Injunctions is the most reactionary weapon used by employers to break a strike. They have been repudiated by the American people and by Congress through the Norris-LaGuardia Act. But employers use the injunctions to mobilize the police power of the state to undermine and break a strike. Even the Army and the Navy has been used for the purpose of breaking strike. An injunction is an illegitimate offspring of an undemocratic government and a reactionary employer in the name of law and order. It leads to violence, as in the case of Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia on March 1st, an ominous concentration of police shadowed the peaceful picketing and parading of UE members. An injunction had been granted against picketing. The company thought it had won a major step towards breaking the strike. UE locals in Philadelphia and Camden organized a protest parade, an orderly parade, headed by their country's flag, in the hands of a veteran of the German campaign. To the tune of the Star-Spangled Banner, while everyone stood at attention. But when the parade started, trouble began. The flag was torn from the hands of the veteran. The veteran was beaten. It was said later, in excuse, that the police lost their heads. They certainly lost them in an organized manner. This is the result of having irresponsible officials in the city halls, the state capitals, and in Washington. When violence failed, the companies gave in. Big business was stopped. The strikes were won and the contracts were safe in the hands of Secretary-Treasurer Julius Emspach.
Yes, big business was stopped. With the CIO in the forefront, labor and the people won the first round. But big business is not giving up. It is starting a new offensive. Prices have zoomed. What we won in the strikes is being stolen back from us through a big business Congress. Where are we going? Well, you know what a company town looks like. With this Congress re-elected, we'll have a company country with company housing, company stores, company unions, company discrimination. We'll have unemployment at home, and ultimately, war abroad. There is only one answer. Vote and vote right. Canvassing, registering, voting. Sustained organized effort of every local in its community. Community political action will hold the gains of the picket lines. Millions of enlightened ballots must be cast. We must elect a progressive Congress. Prosperity and even peace itself depend upon it. But behind each ballot is a person, a woman, a man.
Bill Turner went to town to save the OPA. It was little help. The Tafts and the Byrds, the Hoffmans and the Rankins, big business Republicans and Democrats and their flunkies from the South, they fixed the OPA, like they fixed FEPC, like they fixed full employment, like they fixed minimum wages, like they fixed the Hobbs bill, like they fixed too many things in that year of disgrace, 1946. And Bill could see rising prices ahead. And he could see more strikes. And he was grim.
That this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that the government of the people, by the people, and for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Bill is going to do some fixing of his own. He smells November coming. He even smells the date. November 5th.